So I'm Dan Reinhardt, the president of Crest Leadership, and with me today is Dr. Terry Young. Um, Terry works with us in our Masters in Christian Leadership, the master's portion of what we do. And we're glad to partner today in this webinar, How to Work Through the Messy Middle. And boy, are we ever in a messy time in our culture. That's just now profoundly evident to everybody. And in the middle part is where we're saying some things have really ended. You know, life as we knew before has ended. And there's quite a few voices that are saying it will never come back exactly the way that was. It's going to be different from here on out. So, boy, that just adds a whole bunch of uncertainty and unpredictability. And that's what's happening on the outside. But meanwhile, on the inside, we're doing a bit of an emotional journey with all this. And that's what we want to talk about today. Terry, you have some comments too about what's going on here and with us as we're going through all these shifts and changes.
Yeah, as you've said, I think a lot of us are feeling personally this sort of sense that we're in betwixt and between. We're sort of in this liminal space, even in our culture, in our world, wondering, life is not what it was. We're not sure what it's going to unfold like. And in that liminal space, that is where I think God often does some of the deepest work in us, because we're often at a place where we need to be more, we realize a greater dependence, hopefully, but in our personal lives, but I think also in our observation and our work with other people. Dan and I were on a call a while back with someone who is working with pastors in a particular part of the country. And we use this metaphor that the number of church leaders, and this is also true of educators, I think, and people in healthcare, the number of people who have their hand on the doorknob, that they're feeling, I don't know how long I can do this. I feel like I'm done, but I need to carry on. And I'm in the midst of it all. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that inner part of what you're facing and you're feeling, and it's going to be helpful for you to find out in this webinar today. There's one of 4 stages that you're likely in, and one thing that can help us a lot is to know where are we, because sometimes when we're feeling the confusion on the outside, there's a little bit of a bewilderment on the inside. And here's how we'll do this webinar today. Terry and I actually worked and created a presentation on this, so we're gonna play that recording so it's all done right and without the glitches, and then we're gonna follow that with a time of Q&A and interaction with you folks, and that'll be our time. We'll do that all within the hour here. Well, we're glad to join you today for a discussion, Dr. Terry Young and myself, and we want to talk to you about when you're in the middle. Crest is all about people at midlife, and there are the natural wonderings that come at the midlife stage. But when you're in the middle of the COVID-19 kind of experience, those feelings are even more pronounced, and we can feel like we're in the middle of a storm. And so today, I was talking with Dr. Terry Young about some research that you had come across, Terry. So give us some insight here about this middle time.
Yeah, it was a discovery I made of a project out of Harvard, and the researcher's name is Todd Rose, and he developed a Dark Horse Project, and you can actually Google that, Dark Horse Project, and what you'll see on their website is the image that we're going to provide for you, which is this idea of a person emerging out of a sculpture, and this idea of emergence. So the Dark Horse Project was interviewing and talking to people who, for the most part, were at a point in their life where they were at middle age, many of them, and beyond. And the question was, how did you arrive at where you are today? He was trying to explore the idea that we've got this sort of general concept of how life unfolds. N.D. Wilson, in his book Death by Living, says we've got a North American idea that says we're supposed to live sort of foolishly and furiously when we're young, and then when we're in midlife, we slave away slavishly, we focus in on career and so forth, and then we coast into low impact living when we have enough money to retire. And we also have an idea that our careers and vocations are plan and implement things. We plan when we're young to be something, and then we implement it and we become that. What he discovered in the Dark Horse Project was that of the 50 people they initially interviewed and told their stories, 45 of them, when they interviewed them, were quite embarrassed in telling their story, because they said, my story was not a plan when I was young and then I implemented it. It was, I sensed things along the way and then I responded accordingly. And I'm at a place today I never would have imagined I would be when I was younger. He's countering the Tiger Woods idea that, you know, our careers and vocations are, we pick up a golf club when we're 3 years old, and then we just continue to golf and we become a world-renowned golfer. He said those stories are few and far between. Most of our stories are this meandering, circuitous kind of path where we're sensing and responding along the way to what is my story. And the Dark Horse Project is telling these stories of how people have moved from, it's moved through life with quite a novel journey. And I think that's encouraging.
That is.
In life, we wonder, well, am I in a mid-course correction? Is that a bad thing? No, it turns out that's how most life courses unfold.
That's really good news, actually, because that's one of the things we hear all the time when at Crest is when we have people tell their stories, is that, I didn't think I'd be at this point in my life where I am right now. And I am not sure where I am going. And there's a bit of an angst about this. Like, shouldn't I by now be really clear about where I'm going, what I'm doing? And the study is kind of interesting to say that most people actually don't know.
Yeah. And we had talked earlier about that Wendell Berry quote. I don't know if you have it on hand there.
Well, let me pull that up and just read that here. Wendell Berry says, "It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we have begun a real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings."
Yeah.
Well, that's a good quote.
It's a great reminder that it is in midlife, and right now in the middle of this storm we're in, we're being introduced to our real work, which is to engage fully, to not fall into the wrong kind of zone for the time in which we live, whether it's midlife or the middle of the storm of COVID-19. And there are some zones we can live in. And maybe I could go on and sort of deal with the fact that when we ask the question, we're asking the question through this webinar, what is the zone that I will choose to live in, and you'll choose to live in? And there are fundamentally 4 zones we can live in when we're in the middle of something. The messy middle, even of midlife, or the messy middle of this COVID-19 experience. We'll provide you a visual portrayal of this, but the first zone is the zone of fear. And there are a lot of people living in the zone of fear right now. And in that zone of fear, they're frozen, they're stuck. It is, for so many people, often the starting point on so many fronts, where fear and negativity, pessimism is at play. And when that takes hold, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That fear, false expectations appearing real, as someone has defined fear. Those false expectations, they appear real. And guess what? We end up stuck in pessimism, stuck in negativity. So that's one zone we can live in. We've discovered within Crest that sometimes people come to Crest, whether it's our cohort or our MCL after they've done the cohort, and they will admit, they'll confess, that when I got in the middle of my journey, not knowing quite what to do, my initial sense was I'm scared. I don't know what to do, but they've realized that's no place to stay. So this is where the second zone comes in. And the second zone is the zone of awareness, or the zone where we begin to come awake. We wake up to the fact, I have some learning to do. I better pay attention. And we deepen or broaden our sense of the things that induce fear, or the landscape of threat that is before us. And we see deeper and in a broader way. And the challenge here is that in that awareness of waking up, we can also get stuck there, because we're not locked up in fear, but we've come awake in a sense, but we're paralyzed by the analysis of everything.
Mm-hmm.
We may be learning more, but we're not putting it into action. We've got ideas, but we're not putting it into life. And this is where the third zone is moving from awareness. You've got to move your awareness into growth. And growth is the pivot move that makes the difference. It's an awareness that leads to action, and that action, as perfect as it might be, is what leads us to grow. So we move, we begin to apply, we begin to put our ideas and goals into daily, weekly actions, and we plant some seeds, and we maybe discover that seeds don't grow. We fail, but we get up again and we keep growing. And in that zone, we know that that's where we're wrestling with what one writer refers to as the narrative strain. And the narrative strain in our life story is this strain that we feel. We know what is inside of us, and we know what's in our heads and what's in our hearts, and yet we know what we're living is out of sync with that. This is part of the crisis of midlife, is we're coming awake to the fact that there's a lot of things I've learned and I know and I value and I believe, but am I really putting that into the future part of my story? And that strain is actually a very good thing. It leads to
Yes.
growth.
Yeah. And
The
I've
fourth-
noticed that it doesn't matter if you're a business person, ministry person,
Right.
you're on the same journey.
Yeah.
You'd think that, pastors would have this all together. And
Yeah.
no, we're human beings just like everybody else.
Yep.
We're all on this kind of a four-stage journey that you're describing so well here, Terry. It's
That fourth stage,
it's so
then is-
true.
the fourth stage then is helping others, or you might use the term leading others and leadership. And many who engage with Crest, we sense that many of them have a deep down desire to be in the zone of growth. They want to make sure that their ideas and their dreams and their goals and the future story has put on flesh, or it's, flesh is being put on so that they can live well.
Yes.
Not for their own purpose, but at midlife and beyond midlife, what Walter Wright refers to as the third of life. So we have people who come and they're in midlife. There's some who come to Crest and they would say, I'm not at midlife, but I'm at the third.
Yeah.
We're asking deeper questions about what does my life mean by way of giving it away?
Yes.
And we realize I don't want my life just to be about a growth project for me. I want to grow for the sake of the world and for the
That's
sake
right.
of others. And so that's that fourth zone. We find Crest is a beautiful opportunity and an environment and community and ecosystem where people who want to grow and people who want to help others and lead others, that's where their heart's beating faster. So
That's right.
in the middle of life and in the middle of the storm, you can look at this sort of zone portrayal, and the great need is for us in our influence circles to move people into regions of growth, so as to help others, lead them beyond awareness, beyond just merely learning about all the stuff that's going on. What does it mean for me to do the real work of my soul? And we deal with the matter of adaptive leadership in CREST, and the MCL, we really lean into it in a deeper way in the MCL week. Adaptive leaders, the genius of adaptive leaders is simply this. When we don't know what to do, we actually do know what to do. We learn.
That's good.
And in the times in which we're in, one of the things we need to ramp up is let's learn so as to grow. And out of that growth, there's going to be the strength and power and authenticity to help others.
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
good. I read a recent study that was done right during the COVID-19 time, and I believe the research said that 67% of all Americans are hoping that they can learn something during this COVID-19 time. So the natural instinct when we hit this isolation or this wondering is we want to learn. Our learning curve goes up.
Yeah.
And that's a great instinctive reaction to a time of being in the middle or feeling like you're kind of stuck.
Right.
And so the question is, what's the optimum way to learn? So it really does come down to two choices. You can just keep on learning by yourself, just figuring it out, or you could maybe join with other people who are learning and with coaches who have been on this journey a little bit longer than yourself and who can actually guide you in the path of reflection and discovery. And that's exactly what we do in CREST. Our purpose and our zone that we love to work with is people at the midlife and in the second half, because we have found that you who are in that demographic want to learn. You want your life to matter, and you're willing to invest the time and the effort and the finances to really make that difference. And that's why we just love having students like people in the second half and middle of life come to CREST, because, man, we have the conversations and the reflections that comes out of this is just so good. Yeah. That it's a joy for Terry and I to do the Master in Christian Leadership, the MCL, for those who would like to go on to do that. And we just invite you to come and take a look at this journey. So the question really does boil down to, well, what is my real work at this particular time in my life? Yeah. And it's going to be unique to each one of you, but that's a very good question to think through right at this time of being in the middle of it all. Yes, we are in the middle of it all. Terry, you had some thoughts you were going to share right after this video.
Yeah, what I shared at the outset about liminality. The issue of liminality is that liminal space is referred to as a space that is between what was and what is next. So we use this idea of liminal. It's the betwixt and between, kind of thing. And what researchers have discovered is that we have one of two choices with respect to liminal space. We can embrace it, and that, I think, is the choice of growth, moving from awareness to growth. We can embrace that we're in this odd time, and midlife often is like that, or in the middle of a crisis, or in the middle of a storm, or in the middle of a challenge, is that we feel we're not where next is going to be, obviously, and we're not where we were. So liminal embrace is the positive response to say, okay, I'm going to lean into this. On the 4 dimensions we talk about, the growth zone is the lean-in zone. It is the learning zone. It is saying I'm going to very deliberately commit myself to learn, not only learn mentally, but learn through the action of my life. And I'm going to embrace this liminality. What researchers have discovered, however, is that many people go into liminal depression. That is, they get stuck often in middle spaces, in boundary phases of their lives, and they get stuck there. And so I think the thing that we seek to do at CREST is the model itself is simply the essential component of community. And what's intriguing is that we shared this a little while ago in another webinar I think we did, is that researchers have discovered that if you're looking at a hill, if you're looking at a mountain, for example, and you're judging how steep it is and how hard it will be to climb, the mere presence of social support around you transforms your perceptions of what's ahead. Now, the challenge that many leaders face, whether they're pastors, educators, people of nonprofit leaders, is that many leaders, we still have this leadership loneliness at the point. Many leaders are seeking to look at their hill and they're climbing it without a strong element of social support, without community. But what they've discovered is that if you look at a hill while standing next to someone that you consider to be a friend, the hill looks 20 or 10 to 20% less steep than if you're facing that hill alone. So I've actually done research on this. Perception of your objective, perception of the challenge, perception of the road ahead is transformed by including others in your own journey, in your own pursuit of achievement. This result holds, and this is where it's sort of hinky. They say this result holds even if the friend is 3 feet away, facing the other direction and silent.
Oh my goodness. Just the presence.
Being in community with people changes our perception of the challenge, of the hill, of the mountain we want to claim, of the adventure we want to go on. The dilemma is that we have in North America in particular, this kind of individualized, privatized, autonomous, I need to take it on, I need to stand on my own 2 feet. And I don't think the Lord of life in the New Testament ever had that in mind for any of us. He sent his disciples out 2 by 2.
Yep.
The New Testament is full of one another, build up one another, encourage one another, admonish one another, which is challenge one another, teach one another, instruct one another, forgive one another. It's all wrapped around the idea that the organizational genius of Jesus was that he realized that we cannot do anything in kingdom work alone. And yet the enemy, I think, plays on this. And he loves, as one writer said, the wolf loves the lone sheep.
Yes.
The lone lamb.
Yeah.
He loves that. So Crest is designed around this idea of helping all of us in what are often liminal spaces, betwixt and between.
Yeah.
Community is the key.
And then during this COVID time, we are separated. We're not allowed to be together.
Right.
There's rules that you can't even have people in your home. Like this is unprecedented shifting and separating of people, which is exactly opposite of what we need when we're going through a hard time. So we've done
a workaround.
Yeah.
We've done a workaround and we're doing the workaround, but Crest itself is just simply an encouragement and an opportunity for people to find a learning, growing community of people who I think, as they come into Crest, many of them say, deep in my heart, I want to help the world. I want to help others in my world. And how do I get there? And we believe it's not possible without community.
Yeah. And also during this time of thinking, this deep reflection, it can be kind of overwhelming to try and think, well, how do I even figure this out? The whole of life is changing and unpredictable. So how do I know what to do? So here's where we talk about the importance, when you can't have certainty, you can still have clarity. But the clarity is about you and how God has made you and what he has put within your heart and how you need to live to go forward. And what we do in our Crest time is that we offer an ordered reflection. We'll help you think through all of that. It's really helpful to have a guide or a map when there's so much confusion going on. It's so good to have a map and then other people with us on the journey. That's really what's needed during a time like this. We have a comment here that there's a great book by Dr. Henry Cloud called The Power of the Other. Yeah, that's just affirming this right here. Very much so. Good.
And it's in that book where Henry Cloud talks about his own anecdotal work with pastors, for example, church leaders,
Mm.
when he asked groups of leaders, how many of you have someone that you know right now you could call into your life if you were in crisis?
Mm.
And his anecdotal experience is that 8 out of 10 people in the room honestly say, I don't have anyone.
Wow.
So the power of the other, it's simply, we're wired and created by our creator to need others and as well be in the lives of others. And that comes at H.B. London's research is the same. 70% of pastors that he's interviewed say they have no one that they process the deep pressures of ministry with. So it's a real dilemma and peril when leaders are lonely at the point.
Mm-hmm. So we have to be proactive about this, friends. We can decry the situation that we're in, but we can find ways to actually work through it. And it is most helpful to have some others with you on it. And then you have a path to actually work things through, and you can find out that in some ways, this is a gift. I mean, to have your regular schedule interrupted so that you actually have more time to reflect and be engaged in personal matters rather than always being on the run to do something can actually be a wonderful gift. So we have a real opportunity here in this time of COVID to actually do this together.
I would have a comment for you, Dan.
Yeah.
I'm Glenn Taylor from Ontario. Much of what you're talking about is very, very well supported by a recent book by Bruce Feiler, F-E-I-L-E-R, and that the title presents the summary of it. Life is in the transitions. And I think that ties in very well with your concept of being in the middle. One other resource that I would mention is that I wrote a book a few years ago about the web of life, which essentially emphasizes the importance of the community. And we are strengthened by the community of which we are a part when we implement the teaching of the New Testament relative to our responsibility to each other. I'll just make that comment. I think there are two resources that might be of interest.
Very good. Good. Yeah. Thank you.
Just in my work with pastors, I've found that the pandemic has brought the best and the worst out in churches. So we've had lots of innovation, lots of things being done in new ways, but we also have this other side, the dark side that's come out of people as well. So I've told pastors it's always been there. It's just come out a little more clearly now. And so managing through that is a challenge for pastors, but at the same time, it's part of their growth and part of what it means to lead through times of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Yes, and
It's been
that
a great
pressure
week.
brings out the best and the worst in the congregation too. And so you're dealing with behaviors that you never saw before because of the pressures. And we've heard quite a few pastors talk about this, and it's straining them. They're just feeling drained by how do we navigate all the way from this extreme to this extreme, and they're both are just adamant. And you're supposed to hold this all together. Whew, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
One of our
Richard.
pastors in a smaller community said to me, he said, when I'm walking down the street and I approach a parishioner, I'm doing this mental checklist. Are they an anti-vaxxer, an anti-masker? Are they, what camp are they in? So I know how to engage them appropriately.
Yeah.
Yeah, Richard Tedlow has gotten as a statement, which he says, during a crisis, people or companies don't suddenly change.
Right.
They are what they are, only more so.
Mhm.
So it's a revealer. It's a revealer for all of us. I think we've all sort of met ourselves in a different way through this and realized, oh, I've got some things that are quite odd. I need to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or we double down and just get more anxious or nasty or impatient.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of fear coming out and but fear that's put into kind of a theological framework or end times.
Yeah.
It's like that's explaining it all. Yep, it's end times. This is all predicted, and there's a way of kind of putting a spiritual connotation over a current crisis that we're feeling. And I'm not sure that's always the most helpful way of processing it. Could be part of it, but there's also this personal side of, what's going on in your heart, in my heart. What is it revealing? Do I really trust God going through this? Or am I just going to be full of anxiety? And one person I've heard, he talks about future tripping. And he said, whenever we imagine the future, we usually, we imagine it without God, without Jesus being present, without his presence helping us. What would I be like if I had to experience the scenario comes to mind? And so it can reveal actually that we got some deeper work that needs to be done deep in here. Because I think all of us as believers would have it here, that we trust Jesus, we trust God, and yet we're feeling a lot of turmoil in here. So it tells us there's a journey that's needed from here to here. And that's a deeper work. And it's not a quick fix. This is not something, on this quick webinar here, you're going to, we got it all figured out. No, the deep shift that we're talking about, or the deep work that God needs to do in us, takes time and takes a commitment to do that journey. And that's why we have CREST as a journey, not as a one-off webinar or a seminar. We invite you, like Jesus did. He said, come, follow me. And his disciples needed to be with him for 2 to 3 years before they were beginning to get it. And they still had a lot to learn, even after that.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I journey with a group of leaders that we work with numerous churches. And I'm just wondering if you have, I hear it's a long journey, and I understand that. How could we help leaders to help people move through these zones, especially in a crisis? And I like that statement, during a crisis, people are what they really were. And it is a journey of discipleship. I recognize that. But here's this crisis now. And I think many pastors are feeling, how do we go forward in the midst of maybe some ugliness and move people or lead people on? I know prayer is essential, and I recognize it is a journey. But do you have some other thoughts and experience of those that have worked with the people through a crisis?
Well, Laurie, I can tell you that trying to do it on your own will not likely work. If people are feeling that crisis and the need to be able to move, you better get in real conversations in a trusting environment where you can be transparent and not have to worry that it's going to get talked elsewhere. And that it's in the sharing of your openness about it that the light comes in and you can actually begin to shift. And then when others in the group share as well, you begin to feel like, hey, I'm not the only one. I thought maybe I was just a wimp and I wasn't doing very good, but here's my sister, here's my brother. They're feeling something similar. And just the camaraderie, like we said, together looking at the hill will get smaller. You can actually say, well, you know what, maybe I think I could get that hill. I could take that one. And so you move on into the by community.
Yeah.
What if community is fractured?
Yeah. This is where the leader of that community has to understand their responsibility to shepherd that flock. So a community can be as small as your home Bible study group, or your few people that you meet with, but there's got to be someone who is shepherding that, who's thinking about this and praying about this. And when it's shattered, that's usually because there's been a number of things. It could be a disrespect for people within the group. And there could be a lack of confidentiality, that it was talked outside the group. So what I've discovered, and I've done these small groups for decades, is that when you set up a group, you got to set the DNA of the group so everybody understands right up front. If you're going to be in this group, there's a few things you need to know. Number one, this is a confidential group, which means that when we share in this group, it does not leave this group. That is fundamental to being in the group. And everybody has to commit that you will not share anything outside the group that is personally negative for somebody. You're not going to do that. Second thing is, in this group, we're going to respect each other, which means everybody's opinion is valid and it matters. And we're not going to argue about things. We're going to be, when someone gives out something that's different than what you're used to, be curious rather than be judgmental. Ask them, how did you get to that conclusion? You might be surprised at how they arrived at some of those things. So respect for the individual and for each other in the group is fundamental. And then the third thing is that part of the respect is that we all share. We don't let anyone dominate, and we encourage all to participate so that you level the playing field. You don't want a loud voice coming in and just being in charge of the whole group. So you as a leader have to model that. So, there's other things you can do, but I mean, I would suggest those are three things you need to put into the DNA. And then when there's a violation of those things, you just say, hey, folks, you remember our covenant? And you go over those three things again. And if you correct them, either they will correct or they need to leave. Because in the end, the health of the group is paramount for transformation.
Laurie, it could be that we're in a time where we're going to have to think or rethink the need for congregational healing at many levels through this. I did some work a number of years ago with a group, and we did an entire kind of effort around congregational healing, and we developed a thing called Come to the Table. One of the things that we did is that we help people understand what is trauma, because I think right now we're societally going through trauma, and trauma is injury, and it goes to the core of identity. And when there's trauma, people are, the mix is people are angry, people are fearful, people have shut down. Some people are, let's just move on, let's forget about it. And so you got that mix. And with that mix, unless you are able to develop environments where people can come around the campfire and talk, you're never going to heal community. So we developed a thing called Coming to the Table, and we help people. The first part of it was, let's understand what happens when we go through trauma. And we use the images and metaphors of, think about an earthquake. And we use that metaphor of earthquakes to simply point out, sometimes there's an epicenter to traumatic events, but there's aftershocks. We also use the metaphor of forest fires. Forest fires sometimes are a system all to themselves. And when a fire begins and it gains strength, it can really burn things down and really destroy things. What do you do after a fire? We also use the idea of hurricanes and tornadoes, nature systems in nature. And there's always, after a fire, a hurricane, or tornado, there's always a period of recovery, of providing people, again, liminal space where they're able to address the wounds. And I think there's a lot of congregations that are very fractured and very split and very much in conflict, as you said, Wes. One of our calls earlier, someone said, I feel like I'm pastoring people's opinions. That's all I'm doing these days. And the opinions are all over the map and people are divided. So we are fractured. And there's going to be need some healing because churches have been traumatized, organizations have been traumatized. I'm not sure we're fully aware of that there's injury. And what do you do with injury? Some people say, let's just move on. And a lot of people go say, I can't move on. So the work that we did was actually around the issue of clergy sexual abuse. We worked with the Catholic diocese in a particular region of the US. And we called parishes together and we had this come to the table. And because parishes were what are referred to as tertiary victims, they weren't responsible for what went on. Their priests weren't responsible for what went on, but the churches had to, per capita, pay for the lawsuit and for the money that was needed to come forward. And so these congregations were sitting there, and in the room would be people who were angry. They were angry at the church. They were angry at priests. They were angry at the media. There were people who were fearful, scared. There were also people who were in denial and who said, there's really not much to this. And then you'd have next to them someone who was simply saying, let's just move on. And we realized that these parishes would not be able to move forward unless they in some way got on a healing journey together. That's hard work. But my sense is it's needed. So that may be something, we as Crest and other denominational leaders are working through this. So that's my thought, Lori, on that front.
What I'd like to do here for a couple of minutes is just share my screen again. And I want to show you something that we've learned in working with leaders for the last 20 years. And that is this. There are 3 development paths that people will typically be on. And if this represents the decades of a person's life here, and this scale represents the development of their life and their leadership, most leaders will start well with good intentions, and they develop during these early years. And then you find out that over here, only a minority actually flourish in the end. The majority end up flatlined. And some are even floundering here. And we find that it's like 25% will go on to flourish, which means that 75% are kind of struggling. And it really shows up after the age of 40. And this was the vision. This stat just shocked us to realize that we need to help people in the second half of life to flourish. And most people really benefit from a path and from coaches. And so here's what we do, folks. We offer a journey that looks something like this. There are 6 major themes over the 2 years. This takes 2 years to do this. There's 42 lessons. And we do offer a diploma, but we help you think through getting a hold of your life and getting clear on what your values are about, getting a grip on your strengths, investing wisely in relationships, and creating clarity for how you're actually going to live this out, and then find out what convergence is about. Now, that journey is a deep journey, and it requires thoughtful reflection as well as time. You can't just quickly do this one. But after the 2 years, we also then, with Dr. Young's help, we offer, for those who'd like to go on to get a Master in Christian Leadership, we invite you to come on for that 3rd year. And you take that convergence and you apply it all to a situation or a plan or a project in your life. And this just brings things together for people in a beautiful way. Because in the end, what we're really looking for, friends, is that you can flourish. This is, I believe, what John 10:10, Jesus said in John 10:10, the purpose of his coming. He said, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And that's what we're trying to do, is to step in with Jesus to help each other on this journey, especially during this convoluted time of COVID, to flourish in spite of it all. And that really is the heart and purpose And we want to just invite you to consider being a part of a cohort. In fact, we're launching cohorts in the middle of November. So just go to the website there, crestleadership.ca, and take a look there. We'll send you an email after this webinar as well to just give you some links there. But friends, we're offering a way for you to actually grow during this time, not just be frustrated in this time, but grow. So we are thrilled to do this, and we love doing the journey with people. We've done it now with hundreds of people, so we kind of get how this works. We'd love to do it with you.
I was just asking if you guys had dealt with relationship intelligence, and if it's something that would be helpful for what you guys are talking about. Yeah, it deals with relationship intelligence. So it's based on the relationship awareness theory done by Dr. Ellis Porter.
Okay.
He developed that back in 1970, 1970s and whatnot. And that deals with getting to know the different motivational values, what people are motivated. And you were talking about as an example of, how in congregations, certain people, take offense to things or may be experiencing conflict, right? And there's a reason for why they're experiencing conflict. What I have found is that a lot of leaders and pastors avoid these conversations because they don't know how to have difficult discussions, right? Because they don't understand the different perspectives, and often we take things to heart and offense, right? So, anyways, definitely, I would suggest to look into that. I found that to be extremely helpful. And the work that I do with my clients, and it seems part of what the calling that God put on my heart lately. So I'm just kind of seeing what you guys are doing and how you're dealing with conflict in organizations and stuff like that. So it's very interesting.
Well, I
Good
can
work, by
tell
the
you that we do actually a fair bit of training on relationships. There's that one course there that is about investing in your relationships. We talk a lot about having conversations that get deeper than just the shallow surface, get to the deeper part. And we talk about conflict management. And that every time we go through that, people really lean in because, that's the most difficult thing is when you have conflict. How do you navigate the dangerous time of conflict? And so, yes, we do that part of it. We haven't used the book that you mentioned or the resource you mentioned here, but we do talk about emotional and relational intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, friends, I enjoyed being able to have this conversation with you all, and may the Lord be with you in your journey. And if this is of something that could be of help, we'd love to do the journey with you and to be able to navigate these times together so that we can work through this messy middle and actually flourish. That's our hope and our dream.